One of the main reasons for the fall of Muslim civilization that no one talks about is the role geography and demography played in it. According to a famous geopolitical saying, geography is destiny. This is the geography of Muslim world today. The green areas are the Muslim majority countries, and the yellow areas are where Muslims are a large minority. In 1650, the great Muslim empires of the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals were at their peak. One of the reasons why they were so rich and powerful is because they controlled the areas that connected the world trade via sea route from Europe to India and China, as well as the land trade via the Silk Route from China through the Safavid lands to the Ottoman lands to Europe. By taxing a very large percentage of the world trade, the Ottomans and the Safavids became fabulously rich and immensely powerful. A famous saying in geopolitics is, "Whoever controls the sea, he rules the world." Now, the Europeans eventually took over the world during the period of colonialism in 18th and 19th century. But before that, in the 15th and 16th century, they took over the seas of the world. They took control of Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean, Red Sea, and Mediterranean Sea from the Muslim powers like Ottoman Empire and Mughal India. And these empires lose control of the seas, and after a century or two, the Europeans started to take over their land as well and colonize them. Remember, geography is destiny. In this map, you can see the green areas of Europe, India, and China are the great agricultural civilizations of the world. And connecting them over land is the traditional Muslim heartland of Middle East, Central Asia, and North Africa. And this traditional Muslim heartland is almost entirely barren, not suitable for large-scale agriculture, and cannot support a large population. But this area was good for one very important thing, that is raising thousands of horses and training horse warriors. Horses and cavalries were the medieval battle tanks and aircrafts. A small, well-trained, well-equipped cavalry could defeat a much larger infantry in a medieval battlefield. Horses also could quickly travel great distances, and this way, from the Muslim heartland, large horse cavalry armies could travel great distance and destabilize the ancient kingdoms in India and in Europe. Of all the great ancient agricultural civilizations, India was penetrated the most by the Muslim power, to the point that today Islam is a native tradition in India. After that, it was penetrated in Europe by the Ottoman rule of Southeast Europe and the North African Arab Berber incursion of Muslim Spain, as well as the Turkish Muslim kingdoms in modern-day Russia, in Kazan, Astrakhan, Crimea, and so on. However, with the advent of gunpowder and artillery, although initially the Ottomans and the Mughals proved themselves very adept and one of the technological superpowers of this gunpowder technology, but with time and with the standardization of the guns and gunpowder technology, the size of the army became the most powerful thing in infantry warfare. The larger number of men equipped with cheap and easy to operate guns compared to lengthy training of horse warriors on expensive horseback change the military dynamics. Also, to raise a large artillery, you needed to have a large economy, and economies in the 17th, 18th and 19th century were often supported by large agricultures. Also, because the Europeans find alternative route to these trade routes through Middle East, and they go via the Cape of Good Hope in South of Africa to connect the European trade with India, China, and as well as the North and South America. The traditional trade routes have died away in the traditional Muslim heartlands and the empires of Ottoman, Safavid, and so on. Now, if we look at the Muslim history timeline from the fall of Baghdad in 1258 through the Mongol rule of Muslim heartland, and then from 1305 till 1492 is the period that I'll describe as the high point of medieval Muslim civilization, when they were number one in the world. But surprising to many, it was from 1492 to 1712 when I will argue that Muslim world was roughly equivalent to the European Christendom in terms of power and status. Although in this time the great Muslim empires such as the Ottomans and the Safavids and the Mughals ruled, but it was also the time when the Europeans took over the last Muslim kingdom in Spain, in Granada, also colonized Oran in Algeria. The Russians annexed the Muslim kingdoms of Kazan and Astrakhan, and the Portuguese took over Muscat in the Arabian Peninsula and Goa in Indian subcontinent, and the Spanish defeated the Muslim Brunei Sultanate to take over Philippines. This is the reason why I will argue that this period between 1492 and 1712 was rough equivalence between Muslim civilization and European civilization. From 1712 till 1850 were the period of Muslim decline, not only against the Europeans but also against other civilizations. From 1850, the Europeans took over the entire world thanks to their technological advantage, and including in their colonization was the Muslim heartland and the Muslim world. But in this period of decline, from 1712 onwards, the Muslims in Mughal India, they were challenged by the rising Maratha Empire that started in around 1720s from a small territorial foothold, and 1740 control a large area, and by the time of 1760 control almost majority of Indian subcontinent. After a few decades, the Sikhs from Punjab also repeated the same pattern. Similar thing happens in another ancient civilization in China. The Qing dynasty took over the Turkic Muslim lands in Xinjiang of the Emirates and Khanates of Central Asia. And Russia took over the famous Crimean Khanate around the same time, as well as greatly increasing its influence over the Central Asian Khanates and Emirates. And after a few decades or a century, actually colonizing these Muslim states. That is why I will argue that this is the period when the Muslims were not only declining against the Europeans, but also against the Indians, the Chinese, and the Russians. If you look at the population of the world, you can see that from year 1000 till 1517 and 1800, the majority of the world population were around the area of Europe, India, and China, and the traditional Muslim heartland had much smaller population than compared to these great agricultural civilizations. This data can be further shown in the World Historic Demography, where in the year 1800 the Christians were twice as many as the Muslims, who were smaller than the Hindus in numbers, and the largest religious group was the Chinese folk religions. This is because Europe, India, and China, through its agriculture, could sustain a much larger population. And with the change in technology, when the cavalry fell in importance and infantry and artillery rise in importance, the smaller Muslim population could no longer hold on to the power as before. Economy was another factor. The lack of agricultural economy played its part. Now, I'm not downplaying the role of technology. Initially, the Mughals and the Ottomans were quite advanced in artillery, as well as the role of navy. One of the reasons why Ottomans could not continue with their naval power was their weaker economy. But at the end, geography and demography played a part in the decline of Muslim civilization.